Happy New Year, hockey fans. Welcome to the first edition of the Morning Cup of Hockey, the NHL's newest live morning show. I hope you enjoyed that intro music by Excuse Me from Guelph, Ontario. We'll be featuring a lot of their work in the coming weeks. Very thankful for them for cooking that up. But without further ado, I'm your host, Jonny Lazarus. I'm joined by my co-host, Colby Cohen, and we got a lot of hockey to talk about. But before we get into anything, Colby, I want to hear about your New Year's Eve. Were you tucked in by 10 p.m. or did you make it to midnight?
I did make it to midnight only because my wife dragged me to a wedding, Jonny. Otherwise, you know me pretty well. I would have been in bed by about 9 p.m. and I would have been really annoyed and grumpy about all the fireworks going on around. So you weren't far off on your assumption, but this year the wife dragged me out of the house. How about you?
I'm only saying that because last night, you'd think the night before our first show, we'd be up late texting, going over plans. Colby texts us probably around 10 p.m. Leave me alone. Don't text me. I'm going to sleep. We'll talk in the morning. So I had to trip you off the bat. But
Jonny, that was about 7:30 p.m. So I appreciate
oh,
the
I was in
text.
Seattle time
You're,
still.
you're giving me credit, but I texted you that at 7:30 p.m. last night. Do not bother me tonight. I'm not up all night like you, kid.
Yeah, I'm a night owl, but my New Year's Eve was fun. Got to enjoy the Winter Classic. I was out in Seattle the last couple of days, so if I do seem a little bit tired, it's because I am. I'm catching up. That 3-hour delay or whatever you call it, jet lag actually kicks in, even though it's only 3 hours. But yeah, had a good New Year's Eve. I was out with like the Chicklets guys, the Empty Netters guys, the Gretzky's. I'm not gonna like name
Name
drop. Yeah,
dropping.
I don't
Look
want
at
to name drop. No, it
you.
was a good squad, a
Gretzky,
fun squad.
Chicklets, Empty Netters.
Yeah.
So, Jonny, let's
Uh,
start there. You were
mhm.
you were in Seattle. You were boots on the ground for the Winter Classic. Pretty cool. You get flown out there by the league, and you get to take part in a lot of the media events surrounding the Winter Classic. And they're all different and they're all cool. And the fact that you get to physically get on the ice and film stuff with players, what was that experience like for you? And was this your first Winter Classic you got to do this, or have you done this before?
I did the Winter Classic last year as well in Boston, so it's somewhat of a newer experience for me. But to that point, I think anytime you get to experience a new ballpark or even an old ballpark, like last year was Fenway, this year was T-Mobile. I had never been to T-Mobile Park before, and I didn't really know what to expect because quite frankly, I'm not the biggest baseball fan, but I still have an appreciation for classic venues like Fenway. Like I was blown away almost every time I walk into Fenway Park. But this year, with no expectation. It was really cool to be in T-Mobile. And I actually asked like Kenny Albert when I saw him, I said, is this arena or, park, 10 years old? Like it looks really new. And he said it was built in 1999. I was like really surprised by how old it actually is. It's, north of 20 years. So for me to be on the ice, take in all the sounds and just the experiences. I mean, the NHL does such a good job at making it just a great production. It's not really all about the game. It's also all about the events that go on around the game. And you can see all the detail on the field and the snow and the boat, the Kraken stuff. They really catered it to the city of Seattle, which I thought was really cool because sometimes they do a mix of the two cities that are playing. But this year was really just Seattle focused. But to be around the players and to talk to them and,
Yeah.
hear about what it means to them. I'll tell a cool story too. I had the chance to interview Mark Stone, and Stone played in that game in Lake Tahoe. That was his first Winter Classic, but
That
Tahoe, there
was the
was no
COVID year with no fans,
no
right?
fans, no
With the
family.
sun and the sun glare issue. Yeah, that's right. I
He said
remember that one.
he said as cool as it was also kind of a nightmare because it just like, they're still playing for 2 points, and it wasn't a normal game environment. Whereas this year, obviously they lost, but the spectacle around it, having his newborn daughter out on the ice with him, having his family join him, being able to take in the new year with family, was really cool for him. That's a veteran guy who's won a Stanley Cup, who got to really appreciate it this time around. So that was really cool. And obviously we can go into the game itself because it was just an awesome day. I think everything went as good as it possibly could have.
Yeah, I think the NHL just continues to raise the bar and get better. I've called a number of Winter Classics for Westwood One on the radio, like the Dallas one, the Notre Dame one, and just the way they build it all up around it. I remember at the Cotton Bowl, it was like the Texas Fair on the
Yeah.
field. In Seattle, they were throwing fishes all around, kind of emulating Pike Place Market. You just have to give them a lot of credit. And I always hear there's some grumpy people out there who kind of complain about these outdoor games. They're like, enough's
Not
enough.
you?
But what? No, I
You're
think
not
that
including
these are
yourself in
great.
that?
No, no, no. I'm not one of the grumpy ones complaining. Usually, yes, that's me. But I think these outdoor games are unbelievable. You draw in fans that don't normally watch. The spectacle of it is incredible. You're bringing in, anywhere, depending on where you put the game, from 30,000 to maybe 60, 70,000 in an NFL stadium, which I think is incredible for league revenue. It's incredible to bring in, people who wouldn't normally buy a ticket to a hockey game. I think the way they have the festivals around it with drinking and food, games for kids. There's just a little bit of everything. The sponsors do a great job. There's live music performances. So, I do. I think the whole thing has become a larger than life type of situation that I'm glad they continue to do year after year. And I love how the teams have embraced it. I mean, look at the way in the last number of years they've embraced the outfits leading up to the games. And it's funny because I think the Boston Bruins, for whatever reason, always kill it. You go back to the Notre Dame game, they did Peaky Blinders.
Mhm.
The Tahoe game, they
Tahoe
had
game
those
was
like
sick.
crazy ski outfits on with like those like aviator glasses. And then last year they wore the Red Sox uniforms. And then you look at the way Seattle and Vegas embraced the outfits. They had the fisherman outfits on. If you're Seattle, the guys were walking in with those orange, overalls that you see people wearing at Pike Place Market, where they kind of throw the fish back and forth. And then
Mhm.
Vegas comes in, Jonny, with the Elvis impersonations. I thought they were a little too obvious this year, personally. But again, I appreciate the fact that players are going all in for this for for 2 points, because this is all it is. It's only 2 points. We're not talking about extra points for winning this game. So, I just thought all the lead up to the game was really great, including all of that. And then, I thought that the Gary Bettman portion of the lead up to the game was great. I know that you were able to watch the broadcast, but the interview that he did on TNT, while he didn't necessarily give away specific information, he did tease a number of things.
Yeah, I do want to rewind for a second though and talk about the outfits leading into the game. Did you
Of
see what
course you
Jordan
do.
Eberle said after the game?
I didn't. What did he say?
Jordan Eberle, so the Kraken wore the white t-shirts under those overalls? I guess the initial idea was to go shirtless in them, but Eberle was like, "No, no, no, we look like fireman strippers. We can't do that." Like, so I thought that was pretty funny. But again, like the creativity is so great, and we have the Stadium Series coming up here next month with the Flyers, Devils, Rangers, Islanders. I wonder if they'll do
Oh, they
any kind of
will.
walk-in, but it's not a national. It's not as big of a broadcast, I feel like, as it is on the Winter Classic day. So I don't know if there's going to be as much hype around the walk-in as there was for the Winter Classic. I mean, typically in Stadium Series in the past, I feel like there hasn't been that much.
Yeah, that's probably a good point, but they'll sell that building out, which
Yeah.
is the
Oh
name
yeah.
of the game. I mean, and New York, they don't do anything small. They really don't.
Mhm.
I mean, um, they do everything big. So look, it seems like every year teams are trying to raise the bar, and it just shows you the buy-in that they're getting from teams and from players. And take a breath of fresh air from guys coming in suits. And I think it's a lot of fun. I really do. I think it gives guys something to look forward to in the dog days of the season.
Well, can I put you on the hot seat for a second?
I'm sure you're going to do that quite often, Jonny.
So you've played in an outdoor game. If you could play in an outdoor game right now with any NHL team, which team would you want to be on, and what would you want to wear walking into the game? You're a
Oh
stylish
man,
guy.
well, I mean, look, I think that I did get to play in an outdoor game, BUBC at Fenway, which was really cool. We did it after the original Fenway Winter Classic, and we were able to sell Fenway out. It was an unbelievable experience, and I'll talk more about that when we actually get into the game, because I do think there are certain strategies and ways that teams need to adjust in these outdoor games, and I think we saw Seattle do it, and we didn't see Vegas do it, but we'll hold that for now. Look, I grew up a hometown Flyers fan. I never got to play there. I think it would be cool to, play an outdoor game at Lincoln Financial Field, or be involved in a game maybe at Penn State between the Flyers
Mhm.
and the Penguins. And look, I think Rocky probably would come to mind. I think something like a coming in like the Rocky boxing gear with the stripes and stars on the shorts like he did. Maybe like you mix in a little Rocky and Apollo Creed type of look for the Winter Classic. I think that would be kind of cool, especially if it's the battle for Pennsylvania. Obviously, they're like different worlds. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, they're 6 hours apart by driving. So I think something like that would be pretty cool. How about you, Johnny? What would you wear if you were going to play for the Rangers? Since I don't even have to ask you what team you'd want to play for.
I actually wasn't going to pick the Rangers, to be honest. The team that came to my mind just for this purpose would be the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think it'd be really cool. And I don't know if it'll ever happen, like future Winter Classics. I think Florida and the Battle of Florida deserves one if they could ever make it happen weather-wise. But you're going to make fun of me. If I could, I think this is like such a childish thing. And I'm like literally spoon feeding you
Well,
just
you are
truth.
a child.
I know, but I think like if the Panthers and Lightning did, a Winter Classic, it'd be like pirate theme for the Lightning. I think just like Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers, like that whole vibe, it'd probably be out there. I imagine so, like a little Peter Pan, Captain Hook kind of thing. I think that'd be kind of fun. Like I don't know for the younger fans of the NHL, I think that'd be cool. I mean,
Let's
there are
just
a lot of kids watching the Winter Classic. You got to cater to the kids.
Well, look, next time ESPN does their Big City Greens Classic, we'll make sure you get
Yeah, I'll
involved in
cover it.
that because you're probably still watching Teletubbies at home these days on your off days. So, all right, I want to talk about the Gary
Yeah.
Bettman interview with the TNT panel because I thought it was really good. I mean, first off, Gary Bettman was about as calm and jokative as we've seen because we don't get to see him like that very often, but he did talk about when asked in this interview pregame about the NHL potentially emulating an NBA in-season tournament. And Gary said, and I'm not quoting him, I'm paraphrasing, but he
Mhm.
said something to the tune of, we're going to announce something soon, and our in-season tournament is going to be best on best. It's going to be an international tournament. And I think everybody's ears perked right up because
Yeah.
there is nothing like best on best hockey. It is as good as the NHL playoffs. I mean, we haven't seen it in a long time. I remember going back to the World Cup when I was a little kid in the late, maybe like 96. I remember going to a World Cup game, 3 overtimes, and a Canada versus Sweden, if I remember correctly. I didn't have to go to school the next day because we were at the Wells Fargo Center. Probably wasn't called the Wells Fargo Center then. It was probably called the
Wachovia.
Wachovia Center
Yeah.
at that point. But I mean, we were there till like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's like a core memory for me as a kid going to watch a hockey game. So Gary Bettman, not normally one to share news before it's ready to go out, but he certainly stoked the fire and the interest levels for everybody when he said that in the pregame.
I also loved when he said the regular season in the NHL is already too important. Like teams take it as playoff games as is already. I mean,
Right
a
now,
team that
look
was in
at
that
it.
game, the
Yeah.
Kraken, are a team right now that are climbing the standings after having a really bad start. They're playing playoff hockey right now. They showed it yesterday. So I thought that was really good that he also just, didn't try to compare the NBA and NHL. It's two completely different sports, two completely different leagues. And, listen, the Winter Classic and what it is one of those regular season games that is taken as somewhat of a game 7. It's there's no game tomorrow. It's a, once in a lifetime somewhat opportunity, and the players take it very seriously. So, I think the Winter Classic has become one of those regular season games that matters way more than it actually
Yeah.
should on January 1st. But to that best on best point, I mean, listen, I've grown up now for the last decade missing best on best. Like that's, 10 important years of my life being like 17 to 27 where I haven't been able to see, Canada and US really go at it, at the best stage. So I've missed out on that quite a bit. And that's something that, kids today, like you look at Connor Bedard, who's in the NHL, he probably
Yeah.
doesn't even have memory of it.
We need to see McDavid. We need to see this crop of American players that look like they could be the strongest American team of all time. Like we really need to see this group together go against Canada right now. I mean, enough waiting. It's time. We're looking forward to whatever announcement is coming. The NHL likes to take their time with things. They're pretty thorough. So, we're probably not going to see anything until 2026 would be my guess. I don't know. Obviously, maybe it's 2025, but It'll be great. I mean, if we have a 2-week pause in the season for an international tournament, that would be incredible. Now, over in Europe, they already have national team breaks built into their schedules over there. Now, they don't play 82 games, but they have national team breaks where you go together, you practice for a week or two, you might play a game or two. So this is already something built into the International Ice Hockey Federation calendars all across the world. The NHL obviously being an exception to that. So we'll see what happens there, Jonny. But how about the rest of the interview, though? I mean, you got
Mhm.
to give Biz credit. You really do. I mean, the way him and Gary were going back and forth, I think Gary Bettman said to him, I'm not coming on your podcast because the way you can affect people's careers. I mean, I'm sitting at home laughing on my couch at that, being wildly entertained. And, give props to TNT. They've put together a great panel of guests, of hosts. It's not dissimilar from their NBA coverage with Shaq and Barkley and those guys. Just, I'm not a basketball fan, but I will watch TNT's
Mhm.
basketball show because they do such a good job of entertaining. And
Yeah, to your
I think hockey's doing that right now. And I think they give you a reason to tune into the pregame show because you just never know what they're going to say. I think they do a great job of getting Wayne Gretzky, who everybody wants to hear speaks perspective on everything, keeping him in the game, dialed in, dialed around, especially as we usher in these new star players like Connor Bedard and Fantilli and these guys. So I thought that was great. And then the last thing I got for you, Jonny, is talking about where the next Winter Classic could be,
Mhm.
and how the process goes. And Gary Bettman kind of leaned into that a little bit.
Well, do you want me to guess where it's gonna be? Or do you want
I
me to
mean,
touch on Gary Bettman?
well, I think I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. I mean, I know you live in Candyland, so I'm sure you have some sort of wild thought process on where you think it should be. But just overall with Gary and what he had to say.
I mean, I thought that was as entertaining as any conversation I've seen Gary Bettman do, and a lot of that is in credit to Biz, but that whole panel does a great job. Liam Anson, Gretz, the broadcasters as well, Kenny,
Colby
Edzo,
Armstrong's great when
Jackie.
he's on there. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole crew has completely changed the game and changed the entertainment of the game. And I think that's, the business that we're in, right? Like we want to change the entertainment of the game. We want to make it more fun. And Gary
You
Bettman was
you
loose
YouTube
laughing.
kids are always trying to change
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, but also not even just Bettman, and I don't want to just like skip over Bettman because I thought he was incredible, so entertaining. Didn't give up much, like you mentioned. We didn't really gain a ton of
Just
information
enough.
from it,
He gives you
just enough.
just enough. Yeah.
A good tease, but also we haven't mentioned yet the NHL did something new this year with the Winter Classic and made an MVP award, the Coco Cup, which was handed out to Joey Decord, who had a shutout, the first ever shutout in the Winter Classic, and then he had a great, heartwarming post game interview. I mean, you could sense his personality, and it sounds like he's one of the bigger personalities on that Kraken team. So it was perfect that he was the MVP, and you heard the Joey chants from the crowd. I mean, his post game interview, and I love the fact that they did the MVP award. It's similar to what the NFL has done with the Nickelodeon game they do. They give out like an MVP or something like that. I believe it's called. So I think that's great for the kids too, right? Because I think the animation of it and just like maybe there is a little silliness and goofiness to it, but that's what kids love too. It's not just a game for adults; it's also for the kids watching as well, right? That's how you bring more fans in, bring new eyeballs in, is attracting the younger audience. So I thought a great job by the NHL, a great job by Joey Decord handling that interview as well. Biz, Liam, Ace, and Gretz did a great job interviewing him. But Gary Bettman again, I think a lot of people give him a lot of slack and criticism about how he handles some things. But as
And a
far as
lot of it is well deserved.
yeah, for sure.
Let's not kid ourselves. A lot of it is well deserved, Jonny. I mean, you can't sit here and
No, I'm,
there's a
let
reason
me
he gets
finish,
booed
man. I was
everywhere.
getting into
No,
it.
no, I'm not going to let you finish because you're never going to criticize anyone because you live in a world of sunshine and rainbows. And when I look at you, I think of Buddy the Elf, and you just want to go eat, cookies and pancakes for breakfast every morning. Now,
Nothing wrong with
enough
that.
of it. Enough of it. Enough of it. Let's talk about the game. I want to
Yeah.
talk about the game. There was a hockey game. All right,
Mhm.
great. There was a spectacle, but there's still 2 points on the line. You got two teams trending in very different directions. Between Vegas, between Seattle, Vegas 4-6 in their last 10, Seattle 7-1-2 in their last 10. And look, I was just really impressed with the way that Seattle came out, realized that the ice was a little bit slower, was a little bit choppier. Bush talked about it on the broadcast. It was almost coarse, I believe is the word that he used. And you get into those outdoor game situations, Johnny, and you've got to change your game a little bit. It was perfect weather, 45 degrees. The game was physical. If it's too cold, you don't see a ton of hitting in these outdoor games, right? But this was perfect weather at 45 degrees. But you got to simplify it. And Bush talked about it between the benches. Vegas talked about why they weren't successful because they didn't simplify. And then you watch the way that Seattle played. They simplified the game. They made plays towards the net. They put bodies on top of Logan Thompson, who started the game for Vegas. Aiden Hill is injured. They really thoroughly outplayed them. There were some pushes from Vegas. They carried play for small stretches of the time, but you look at the way Seattle executed by chipping pucks in, just kind of playing behind Vegas's defense, constantly making them turn and go back for pucks, constantly putting pressure on them, to overhandle it, which is not the way Bruce Cassidy coaches his team to play. They underhandle pucks defensively. Now, look, you got to mention the fact that Shea Theodore is out. He's injured right now. Ben Hutton also out. So some holes on the back end. You can always find that on Daily Faceoff's website. They do a great job of constantly updating lines, injuries, stuff like that. So, you see some of those guys that are injured, but ultimately, I just thought Seattle really continued to play well, north-south simplified hockey, Johnny, and they seem like they're clawing their way back into the playoffs right now.
Well, the Kraken had really high vibes going into this game because they had won 4 straight. Now they've won 5 straight, and they've only allowed 5 goals in those 5 games. So they're defending really well, and Decord's playing really strong in net. But like you said, Colby, that was a Kraken-style game. Like, they're not going to outskill anyone in the
Yeah.
NHL. They're
They
going
don't
to
have
outwill
star
you.
players.
They don't. They don't. But also, a lot of players have said previously, and I don't know if this is the case yesterday, but I don't know if you've heard this as well. Playing on the road at Climate Pledge Arena is apparently the fastest pace of play in the NHL with the way the Kraken play north-south. That's what a lot of opponents have said about playing there. So I would claim that that was probably the case yesterday because we saw it happen a little bit in Vegas. Was flustered in the beginning. They kind of got into their game offensively at the end. But again, Joey Decord was impossible to beat yesterday.
Yeah.
And with the ice conditions like that, you can't try to outskill a team because the ice is choppy. It's, not as clean, not as pretty. So you got to play simpler, like you just mentioned before. And the Kraken, I think it was after the game, Yanni Gord said that they have 4 second lines. That was the quote, right? So the way they play is that they have the necessary skill to put pucks in, but they also have that little extra grit that not all teams
Yeah.
have, So
Right.
the Kraken played as about a perfect game as they could have. And yeah, like you said, they're buzzing as of late, 7-1-2 in their last 10. And this is a team to look out for come playoff time.
Yeah, look, Dave Haxtell preaches, getting pucks in behind the other team's defense. He does not want, east-west play at the blue line. He doesn't want east-west play at the red line. They're all north-south. And they don't have the personnel. They don't have a Nikita Kucherov. They don't have Jack Eichel. They don't have these star players, Patrick Kane, whatever, that drag the game east and west, that slow the game down. So I think you credit that coaching staff in Seattle between Haxtell and Jay Leach for really knowing who they have. And look, Vince Dunn's been phenomenal for them this year. He really has. Ever since they took him and pushed him from the second power play up to the first about a year and a half ago when they traded Giordano, who was their first captain. He's kind of really stepped into that number 1 defenseman role, and he's done a nice job. He really has. I mean, he figured in on the first goal with getting a puck through, Tolvanen with a great tip. But again, Tolvanen, Borgen, Gord, these are their second liner type players that are scoring goals for them. So give a lot of credit to Seattle. They win a huge game. They're going to continue to build off that game. If you had asked me 2-3 weeks ago if I thought Seattle would look like a playoff team, I would have laughed at you. And I did laugh at you because we've talked about it. But the way that they're going right now, they look like a team that I always thought Minnesota would find their way into the wild card. I'm thinking that's probably going to be Seattle now. I think Seattle's probably a team that finds their way into the wild card. I still think Edmonton's a team that finds their way into the wild card. But Johnny, this underscores for a team like Vegas, who's 4-6 in their last 10, and 1-5 in their last 6. It scores the importance of winning games early on. It's why the teams sitting in playoff spots come American Thanksgiving usually make the playoffs. Whatever the percentage is, I believe it's like above 80% or something
Mhm.
like that. Um, excuse me, it gives you the ability to have a slump in the middle of the season and still be at the top of the league. And that's what Vegas is. They're still the top of their division. They're still part of the top of their conference, and they're in the top 5 or 6 in the entire league. So it just is another example of why starting slow, basically, unless you're the Edmonton Oilers, who seem to start slow the last couple of years and then they just go on ridiculous runs.
Mhm.
You got to win games early in the season, Johnny.
And it's funny you say that because the 2019 St. Louis Blues are the one exception, right? They were in last place in January. Everybody loves to talk about it.
It's the
Uh,
exception, though. It's not the
yeah,
rule.
I was gonna say I think they kind of ruined that theme for like all the teams that start bad because like the Oilers had a bad start this year, and it's like, oh well, the 2019 Blues did it, so maybe they, the Oilers could be that. Um, but like you said, Colby, like the Vegas Golden Knights again, they played hockey until mid-June last year. You'd have to think it's going to catch up to them at some point, and I think they were the most surprising team. They had the best start of any defending Stanley Cup champion this year, 11-1-0 in their first 12 games, and they played a lot of hockey. They played 38 games so far this season, and we're only at the new year, and they're going to have a little bit more of a gap in between games in the second half, so that's good for them. But they're also missing Shea Theodore on the back end, who's
Which
probably
is a
their
huge,
most
I mean, that's a
Mhm.
huge loss
Huge.
off, especially for a team that's not scoring a lot of goals. I mean, he
Yeah.
generates. Obviously, they have Petrangelo, who does a little bit more of everything for you. I mean, I think Petrangelo is unbelievable. I think he's
Mhm.
one of the elite premier defensemen in the league. But I think Theodore is one of the elite offensive defensemen. I mean,
He's nasty.
the way that guy plays along the blue line, the way he's able to create angles, get pucks down and in and around the net. He's such a threat to jump in the play and just, put more stress on forwards who have to defend him, which creates more chaos in the defensive zone. So I think an important thing that we'll have to ask Frank Seravalli, because he's going to join us here in a couple of minutes, Johnny, we're going to have to ask him, how patient is Vegas going to be? I mean, they're not a team that's been real patient traditionally when they haven't played well. So we'll
They
have
don't
to
have to
find
be.
out. We'll find out. Well, because everybody wants to play there,
Exactly. They
but
don't have to
we'll,
be. Yeah.
we're gonna have to ask Frank, like, how patient is Kelly McCrimmon gonna be? Because he can't like this 1-5 stretch coming out of the break as well. I mean, you thought maybe they'd leave some of this behind them, but they go into the new year kind of limping a little bit. Still in a good spot, but again, we're seeing more and more NHL teams not patient with the fact that, yeah, we're in an okay spot, but we're still going to make changes. So that's something we'll have to ask Frank when he joins us.
Yep. But with that said, we'll be talking to Frank Seravalli here in a short second, so don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Morning Cup of Hockey. We are now going to be joined by hockey insider and president of hockey content at the Daily Faceoff, our friend Frank Seravalli. Frank, Happy New Year. It's an honor to be joined by you. And what did you take of yesterday's Winter Classic?
Happy New Year, guys. Yeah, great to be with you, and best of luck on Morning Cup of Hockey. Can't wait to watch you guys grow. Glad to be part of the first show. Winter Classic for me. Everyone always kind of shits on it around the league, saying, "Oh, you know what? Too many. There's been too many Winter Classics, too many outdoor games." Johnny, you were there. When you're in the market, you realize how important it is to the market, and that's really what matters. And by the way, I think the NHL kind of found a sweet spot with the timing of it. Before the Rose Bowl, before the Sugar Bowl, was kind of asking people, "Hey, what are you up to?" Like even some casual hockey fans just texting, calling friends yesterday. "What are you up to?" "I'm watching the Winter Classic." "Oh, that's new." That's a pretty big audience for the NHL in the US. And I hope the numbers show that today when they come out. But it seemed like a pretty well presented game. And I thought in terms of aesthetics and everything else that goes with it, probably one of the better looking outdoor games we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think we're all pulling the same rope there, Frank. I think we all agree that these are great for the NHL. They bring in fans, they pack stadiums. It's a spectacle. It gives people something to watch. And give TNT credit; they did a great job on the broadcast, being being entertaining, which we've talked well enough about. But Frank, you're the insider.
Here's where they lose me though. The Stadium
Uh-oh.
Series game, the two of them back to back at MetLife. Johnny, I know, Ranger guy, you're gonna be all juiced
Oh,
up.
he'll have his Lafreniere jersey on. Don't worry.
Yeah, he'll be excited. But two games on back to back days in the same stadium. I don't know. I know it's Islanders, Rangers, but for me, it kind of feels a little cheesy. We'll see. I'll see what that looks like.
As long as every seat is taken,
Yeah.
I'm good with it. As long
They
as every
also did a
seat is
good job.
taken.
They did a good job about a decade ago at Yankee Stadium when they had Rangers Devils and Rangers Islanders. It was kind of the same vibe, and that was a pretty successful event. So I would imagine that, this year's will be just as much successful. And, you bring it to MetLife Stadium, it's probably one of the better tailgate parking lots in all of the NFL. So you bring that culture to the NHL, and that'll be fun in itself. I'm sure we'll see a lot of good tailgate
Johnny,
content.
are you one of the Jonas Brothers? Are you going to be performing?
I think that's a compliment, if anything. And I'd love to perform and sing on stage with the Jonas Brothers. Who wouldn't?
I bet you would.
Well,
Yeah.
we know he'll be on the ice. We know he'll be doing his interviews, and like I said, he'll be wearing his Lafreniere jersey when he's interviewing Lafreniere. People are going to wonder, why is this guy interviewing?
Guys, these are nice chirps. I'm taking these as compliments right now.
We know you're a little bit of a super fan, so we won't break on you too hard there. But Frank, we're also going to put you to work a little today. You are our inaugural guest here, and for a good reason. There has been some action around the league, specifically. Let's start with the goalie waiver wire. Some interesting or maybe not so surprising moves in the past couple of days with Samsonov and Comrie both going on waivers. What's going on with goaltenders around the NHL, Frank? Because I do feel like this year, even more than normal, we are talking about this position frequently.
I say all the time, we should change the name of the sport from hockey to goalie, because you can't win if you don't have one. And it's kind of amazing what the Leafs have been able to put together this year in spite of some really poor goaltending from Ilya Samsonov. I mean, take a look at his record. 5, 2, and 6. So he has points in 11 of 13 games. Like
Sounds
that's
pretty good.
it's bananas. That makes your head explode. Like, come on. And he's done it with one of the worst save percentages in Toronto Maple Leafs history, which, as we know, goes back 100 years. And he's got the worst save percentage of all goalies in the NHL. Yet the Leafs have still been able to milk, squirt, get some points and drop them in the bucket, which is really the only name of the game in terms of the NHL and the standings. So they've been able to do that in spite of their goaltending, which to me kind of speaks to a team that I think is a couple defensive changes away and bolstering their lineup away from really being a threat. They're not in that category for me right now, and not yet, but they've got this goaltending situation to figure out. Samsonov clears waivers. He goes to the Marlies. He's not going to dress this week. They're just solely trying to rehab his game and his confidence. And they've arrived at this sort of fascinating juncture. Dennis Hildeby comes up. I call him the Hildebeest. He's 6'7", has played in Sweden, has a limited track record in North America. But at 22 years old, he's going to be the backup to Martin Jones while they try and figure this out until Joe Wall can come back. Wall has been really special. And I think they're kind of maybe wishing, hoping, praying that some combination, if they could get this right, of Wall and Martin Jones would be enough for this team to kind of skate through without having to make a move. But I think the Toronto Maple Leafs are sitting, waiting, and ready to do something when they find someone that they feel can be a difference maker. And you just said, we've been having this conversation all year. Okay, so let's say you have some assets to move if you're the Leafs and you're going to fix your goaltending problem. Who are you going to go after? And that's really the biggest problem is anyone that has and feels good about their goaltending, they're not moving that guy because they know how much of a rare commodity it is.
Well, to that point, Frank, I also think the narrative has somewhat shifted the last couple of years. I mean, you look at guys like Aiden Hill, Darcy Kemper, even back to Jordan Binnington, who wasn't such a big name when he won the Stanley Cup. I think you look at teams like Toronto, even if they do get a good goaltender, if they don't fix their defense situation, like the New Jersey Devils as well, they've had a weak blue line this year, and that's really hindered them. I look to other teams' blue lines right now, and I would say Toronto is probably up there on the top of the list that if they get a decent enough goaltender, they're probably one of the most scary teams in the NHL. But is there any other team that you think outside of Toronto that could use a goalie more than them?
Well, I think New Jersey's on that list. What about the Carolina Hurricanes? I mean, you talk about defense core. They have arguably the best defense core 1 to 8. And I would include Tony DeAngelo in that 8, who's been a healthy scratch for a huge bulk of the year. There's a guy that's a 40-plus point defenseman on any team that just hasn't been able to get in the lineup. But the Canes have been where they have been throughout this season based on solely their goaltending. I think it's one of the true things in the analytics age that we've really struggled to process and come up with an answer for is how to properly isolate a goaltender's performance relative to the rest of the team in front of him. I don't think that's properly been done yet. I think the Carolina Hurricanes are the latest example of why they've really kind of struggled to answer that question. And when you look at some other teams around the league, like New Jersey, as you mentioned, like I don't think we've talked enough about the total wholesale changes that New Jersey has had on their blue line. You know, it's one thing to say goodbye to Ryan Graves and to Damon Severson. Okay, that hurt. And you've got to put some younger guys in the lineup. Then you have Dougie Hamilton go down with a torn pec. That's probably going to keep him out for the rest of the season. And all of a sudden, you've swapped out 3 of your top 6 defensemen for a team that had Stanley Cup aspirations. Yeah. And now you're grappling just trying to make the playoffs on top of the poor goaltending that you've had. Yeah. So, some of these problems have compounded upon themselves. But to me, I think the biggest storyline that I'm watching in 2024, it's not the trade deadline. It's not free agency. As much as everyone wants to get excited about the next Willie Nylander contract or what happens with Elias Pettersson in Vancouver, or pick, one of the hot topics, what do the Calgary Flames do at the trade deadline? For me, the number one storyline in 2024 is the incredible change that we've seen in goaltending and how teams, the smartest teams, I think, are now going to go with spending the least amount on goaltending possible. Look at the LA Kings. Look at what the Toronto Maple Leafs might do if Samsonov doesn't come back to play. You've got a team like the Edmonton Oilers suddenly not spending a ton on goaltending. You're seeing changes not just in the marketplace with the salary cap, but I think the next change you're going to see on top of that is a shift. There's been a real push and pull so far between modern NHL goalies that play the modern style of game and some of the guys who are stuck playing a style from 10 years ago. And I'll give you 3 of the latest examples. I just touched on Wall. Jonny, you were out in Seattle and you saw Joey Decord with the first ever regular season shutout or Winter Classic history. Decord plays the modern style. Joel Hofer in St. Louis plays the modern style. Those guys are taking charge in their crease for good reason, because their game is best suited to try and go after the huge advantage that shooters have had in the NHL.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if teams start to go to this, Ullmark Swayman situation where you're just paying a little bit to both guys. I mean, they both, make good money, but neither of them make $7 million, $8 million, $9 million. So they seem to have it down. And I wonder if Ullmark becomes available, because I think Swayman is their guy long term, but they're a team that has just continued to rotate. goaltender.
Yeah, but you know where
So
they lost it last year, Colby? Was when Jim Montgomery didn't rotate in the playoffs when they
I agree.
needed to in that first round.
Well, he never gave anybody a full stretch during the season, so to expect him to do it in the playoffs was kind of silly to me.
I think that was the biggest mistake. I think that's why they lost round 1.
And that's why I wonder if at some point here in the second half, the Bruins do ride a guy for a couple weeks if they get hot. I don't know the answer to it. Look,
Why can't guys split in the playoffs? I don't understand. Look at the 2 Stanley Cups that Pittsburgh won. Marc-Andre Fleury did half the work in both of those before you had Matt Murray come in and win the whole thing.
Well, Frank, I agree with you.
I don't know if that was planned.
Of course it wasn't planned, but think about it. If these guys are not playing night after night anymore, it's not like it used to be where one guy played 70% of the games or 75% of the games. It's why, will we ever see a goaltender start 1,000 games again?
Nope.
I mean, like, we won't. So, like,
Marc-Andre Fleury is the last of a dying
Exactly.
breed. He's the last guy that's going to play 1,000 games.
If you can't have Jeremy Swayman or Linus Ullmark play 4 or 5 games in a row during the regular season, then you're going to ask him to do it in the first round of the playoffs under way more stress, way more physicality, way more eyeballs, pressure, intensity. Yeah. Why do you think that they're physically ready for that if they couldn't do it or don't do it during the regular season? So I think it's a good point, Frank. I think that was a total misstep by Monty. And I got my eyes on that situation because I believe the Bruins are not as good as they've been. I think their goaltending has just been stellar.
Who's gonna be the first coach to step off the ledge and do it? No one really goes into the play. No one that I know of has gone into the playoffs thinking that they're gonna have to play both goalies the whole time.
Well, I actually might have a case here because Jonathan Quick right now is making a name for himself in New York. Well, that's the argument that's been said in New York, is that Igor Shesterkin hasn't been playing as consistently because Quick's been playing so well that he hasn't been able to get into a rhythm, and that's why he struggled a little bit early on. So I think that's a little bit of the argument as well, right? Is if your number one guy isn't getting the reps that they're used to getting in previous years, do they then kind of fall off a little bit? You know,
Jonathan Quick has absolutely blown my mind this year.
Everyone's.
I thought he was washed. I thought he was
save of the year.
It was not just save of the year. I think he's the comeback player of the year. I mean, think about where he was last season. It was like a mercy trade from Columbus to Vegas. It was like, oh, get him in there as the third guy. I thought he won the Stanley Cup. His numbers were so poor. There's no way this guy is going to be able to keep going. And then when the Rangers, I think they were interested in bringing back Jarro Halak, but not at the same money that he was making. Jonathan Quick was not their first call.
Yeah.
And he ended up being their second call. And I was like, oh my God, what a bet that is to take a guy whose numbers had been so bad. But there must be some kind of Connecticut connection between.
I was just going to say, it's a little bit of that hometown cooking, which doesn't always work. And Frank, I don't want to take too much of your time. So I just want to hit you with this.
You're kicking me out?
I just want to hit you with
You're in the boot, Frank.
briefly before we let you go. Ottawa Senators, they made an announcement over the weekend. Quickly run us through what's going on in Ottawa and what can we expect from the news out of Ottawa.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were kind of expecting the Sens to come out and name a new general manager solely because the time that we had spent around Michael Andlauer, their new owner, he had made it really clear, I want a two-headed monster. He had been a minority owner in Montreal, had seen up close and personal how it worked between Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes, and he wanted to try and emulate that style. Now, he didn't do it necessarily in terms of title because Steve Staios retains both president of hockey ops and GM, but bringing in Dave Poulin as their, senior vice president, he's going to play a large role in what happens next. And I'm really excited to see it. Dave Poulin was my teammate at TSN for 6 years. Just an incredibly bright, detailed, super sharp guy who's, you could see why he's one of the best leaders ever to play in the NHL. Just being on his team and seeing what it was like being around him on a daily basis. He's got this confidence about him that, it's so incredibly positive and infectious to be around. I'm excited to see him bring some of that to Ottawa. And you see Ryan Bonus get promoted to associate GM. He gets, more title, more say. They're kind of going to do this as a group. And you heard Jacques Martin, their coach, say this is going to be a collaborative effort in that it really wasn't like that before. It was kind of one person, steering the ship, that they're going to have multiple hands on the wheel now. And I think for the Sens, the more voices, the better. Steve Stais, he's won at the junior level, but he doesn't have a ton of NHL front office experience. Dave Poulin has been around multiple NHL front offices. He's ready to step in and do that. Ryan Bonus, he's still learning. So they're all going to do it together. And then they're going to have Jacques Martin have his voice and influence as well after all that time on an NHL bench.
Well, you wonder if the collaboration we're seeing out of Philadelphia between Danny Briere, Keith Jones, and John Tortorella is kind of sparking. I saw it in Chicago with Kyle Davidson and Norm McIver and, Jeff Greenberg, who's no longer there. He's now a general manager in the MLB, but a very collaborative front office there. So, Frank, we appreciate it, all the information. We appreciate, the inaugural guest visit by you. We'll be ringing you up daily to get all the latest breaking news and have you on. And for anybody watching, don't forget Frank's show DFO Live every day at noon Eastern, a show that I like to go on and argue with Frank on pretty regularly. So Frank, Happy New Year, and thanks for joining us, pal.
Happy New Year,
Thanks,
guys.
Frank.
Good luck with the show.
Thank you, Frank. All right, Colby, let's go into some PWHL talk. That was a big topic of discussion yesterday. The inaugural game, New York comes out and wins 4-0 against Toronto. Again, struggles for Toronto now in a different league, but that's a joke for another time as they get shut out in the
Our
first
producer
game.
loves it. He loves it.
We're getting the finger here right now.
He's flipping us the bird behind the camera right now because, he's a big Toronto fan. But look, Jonny, I love the rule changes in the PWHL. I really do. I think allowing the girls to hit, I think just completely changes the flow of their game, allowing physicality into their league. I mean, look, I spent years in Boston training alongside Hillary Knight, Brianna Decker, and company from the U.S. national team, and they're strong. And the fact that they weren't allowed to have body contact, I think, was holding their game back. I know in the first game, in the Toronto game, there was a lot of physical play. There was a lot of hits finished. There was open ice hits. There was chippiness. This is what hockey's all about. This is what is the spirit of hockey. So I love that rule, Jonny. For me personally, I know there's a couple other rule changes you want to take us through. But I was very enthused to see the physicality in that game.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I want to shout out my friend Jill Saulnier. She had a beautiful goal in that game to put New York up 3-0. Another phenomenal hockey player with a great career, an Olympian. So kudos to her there. And some other rule changes just to get back in the topic of conversation. They're doing that 3-2-1-0 point system, which we've seen now in college hockey as well.
Makes too much sense. I don't know why the NHL is not doing it.
But then here's my personal favorite. They're doing the jailbreak. And for those who don't get that reference, it's a dodgeball reference from when you're growing up playing dodgeball. If you score on the penalty kill, it nullifies the penalty. So if you score a shorthanded goal, it ends the power play, where we've seen that happen a ton in the NHL. A player that comes to mind is Simon Holmstrom on the Islanders this year, who's had a lot of shorthanded goals. But I think that's a great rule. It just gives so much more incentive to go after it shorthanded as well. And we see a lot of teams do that now. Especially a 5-minute major. Imagine giving up a shorthanded goal in a 5-minute major, what that would do.
Yeah. Oh my God. No, I think it totally changes the way teams penalty kill. And you have to wonder if the NHL doesn't have their eye on some of these things. And maybe they'll kind of let it test out in the women's league, see how that goes. And then see if that's something that they want to do. So we'll keep an eye on that throughout the season. I think they're going to be on TV quite a bit. Good for them. I'm always happy to see, Hillary Knight and company have their opportunity to play on the big stages. So, Jonny, I think today we'll wrap with a little World Junior talk. I think there's some exciting hockey. We're seeing sort of the next generation of NHL stars on display. Team Canada playing this morning, actually, against Czechia. Macklin Celebrini, he's been as good as advertised in this tournament. The 17-year-old tearing up the 19-year-old so-called tournament, leading the way for Team Canada this season. The future first overall pick, Boston University freshman Macklin Celebrini. You've seen him play college hockey, Jonny, so I'm sure you're not surprised, but the kid's just been tremendous.
Yeah, I don't think any moment is too big for him as well. I mean, he seems to perform when he's needed most by any team he's on, whether that's BU or Team Canada. And this kid's so exciting. And, that's one of the arguments we're going to have later on this season is that the teams that are falling out of the playoff picture, like, how could you not want to tank to get this kid? I mean, Macklin Celebrini is the definition of a game changer. The game I actually called him, BU at UMass, he scored 2 goals late in the third period to help BU come back and win that game.
Yeah.
So, I've seen it firsthand, but the other names on that list, Cutter Gauthier and Willander, like those two guys are phenomenal as well, really stepping up for their countries, USA and Sweden.
Yeah, I hear people talking about the Flyers potentially adding at the deadline, which I think would be absolutely asinine, batshit crazy to do. But they are going to get a big time addition to their team in Cutter Gauthier later this year after BC hopefully loses early in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, I'll be taking lots of shots at BC throughout the history of the show, being a BU guy. But Cutter Gauthier has been awesome for Team USA. He's going to step right into the NHL sometime in March, probably. If the Flyers are able to make the playoffs, we will see Cutter Gauthier. And then Tom Willard, the 11th overall pick from the last draft, he's just been stellar for Team Sweden on the back end. I mean, he's been, unbelievable, leading his team in plus minus, playing the hard minutes. He's chipped in offensively. His general manager, Patrick Alvin, said the other day in Vancouver, don't expect to see him in the NHL anytime soon. We plan to keep him at Boston University for another season, which was music to my ears because I follow BU quite closely and still stay in touch with the team. So knowing that Willander is going to continue to play for BU as a sophomore, I think is great. I think the Hughes brothers have sort of set the tone for top level defensemen staying a second year in college. Those have been some of the Studley performers here at the World Juniors. And just to note, Canada is down 2-1 right now to Czechia with about 6.5 minutes left in the second period. So they've had a difficult time scoring, Team Canada. They got shut out by Sweden in the prelims. They're having a difficult time scoring right now. I don't think this Canada team is as good as teams we've seen in the past. But they're going to have a mountain to climb here to get through Czechia because they're a tough team.
They don't have that Canadian crowd behind them to give them that extra boost they always need.
Totally agree with that, Johnny. I think World Junior should be in Canada every other year at the least. I think Canada brings out the best of World Junior. Watching USA play
Give
games
Sweden credit, though. They have a good crowd.
For their home games,
Yeah.
for the home games, for Team Sweden games. When World Juniors is in Canada, the games are all pretty packed. They really are. I mean, those Canadian fans love the World Junior more than anyone. You got to give credit where
That's
credit
true.
is due. I'm a USA guy through and through, but I will give credit to the Canadian hockey fans, which is why I just look. If you ask players from Team USA, would you rather play in an empty building or would you rather play in a hostile environment in Canada? You're taking that hostile environment anywhere in Canada any day of the week. So Team USA will face off against Latvia at 11 a.m. Gauthier, Rutger McGroarty, the Winnipeg Jet first round pick. His game has started to come along. He came into the tournament injured, hasn't played in like a month or a month and a half. Had some issues with his ribs, which is a tough injury to come back from. He gets a hat trick the other day. He's playing on that top line with Gauthier. Lane Hudson, the defenseman, has been, really good at times in this tournament. And then draft eligible Zeev Boyum has been really good for Team USA. He'll be a top end NHL draft pick this season. There's a lot of stars. That's why I like watching the World Junior, Johnny. I like to get familiar with these guys before we start to see them in the NHL, whether they're drafted or draft eligible. So we'll see what happens here. I hope Canada wins. I hope USA wins. I always want to see those teams face off when it matters. So we will see what happens here down the stretch.
Today is loaded with World Junior games, like you mentioned, all 4 quarterfinal games. Canada and Czechia right now, USA, Latvia at 11, Slovakia and Finland already finished up, and Sweden versus Switzerland at 1:30. So a lot of games to watch today. Colby, I want to ask you, though, before we finish today's show, what is the one World Junior moment that sticks out in your mind, just from memory, a favorite moment, or even least favorite?
Well, look, I remember back in the day, well, maybe not even back in the day. To me, the moments that stick out are like the shootout where Taves scored all those goals, the shootout where Troy Terry scored all those goals.
You love shootouts? That's the memory that you're going
It's
with?
just you just
Shootouts?
remember those shootouts because these guys score. Like I remember Patrick Kane, he scores 3 or 4 times. Peter Mueller for USA, they just keep rolling the same players out, scoring, scoring, scoring. My earliest World Junior memory is Rob Shrimp playing for Team
Mhm,
USA, wearing the great white skates,
mhm.
kind of the OG lacrosse style, pick the puck up on the net hockey player. We'll have to get Rob on the show at some point. The next time we see, Zegras or Bedard do the Michigan,
Mhm.
we'll have to get Rob Shrimp on here because, like I said, he's kind of the OG. I know he's not Mike Larrick and the OG who actually did it in that game, but he's been doing this forever. So,
OG YouTube hockey guy.
exactly, of
Yeah,
course, right? Yeah,
yeah.
he should have his own YouTube channel. Actually,
You should.
he's just so good with the puck. So, those are some of the good moments that I remember. I remember Team USA winning it when Carlson scored in overtime. But it's usually, watching the World Juniors. It's usually watching our guys lose to Canada is what I end up, remembering most, unfortunately. So, we'll see what happens this year.
Are you gonna ask me mine, or are you just gonna talk about you?
I don't care about yours.
Well, I don't know. I got to watch Jordan Eberle play in the Winter Classic yesterday, and I think when I think of World Juniors, like I think of Jordan Eberle. That's the guy I grew up. Even though like he was on Team Canada, I don't think there's ever been a more clutch World Junior player than Jordan Eberle. He scored that tying goal, I think in '09 with like 5 seconds left against Russia, which was insane. I'm getting chirped here by our producer. He said I've seen like 4 World Juniors. To be fair, I didn't even know what it was till 7th grade. So like that's just what it says
Which
about the World
like
Juniors in
three,
the
four
States.
years ago. I mean, that wasn't
Yeah,
that
yeah.
long ago.
Hey, you want to cheer me for being young? I'll take that all day. I don't give a shit. But Jordan Eberle again, like I said, World Junior legend. But I think that gold medal game, I believe 2019, like the McAvoy Fox, that USA team against Canada, I believe in Montreal. That game was probably one of the best hockey games I've ever watched, just from start to finish. I believe the US came back from down 2 twice separately in that game, and then found a way to win it in the shootout. But that game was that's what the World Juniors does, right? I think even back, to 2010, and yeah, I might sound old here, but Nino Niederreiter had like a crazy game for Switzerland where he scored like 2 goals to upset maybe the Czech Republic at the time. I forget which country it was against, but there's just like little heroes for all these different nations. Germany has a big win this year. All these like cool storylines that happen
You know what
in
they
this
need to
tournament.
you know what they need to figure out though in World Juniors is the officiating because every year they're just too involved. Whether it was the last year in the
Yeah.
US Canada game with the goaltender interference. I mean, they blew that call last year, one of the two at least. This year, Connor Geekie gets thrown out of a game
I
for
love that he tweeted though after. Did you see that?
I mean, it's like
I
that
love
was the
that.
most ridiculous call. Are you kidding me? That was a perfect hit. They need to figure out their rule book, the IIHF, and they need to stop calling the result. They need to call the penalty, not the result. And I think that's what happens with these IIHF refs is they call the result. It was a clean hit. Forget it. It annoys me how much these IIHF refs are constantly involved in the World Juniors. Let the kids play, Johnny.
And what do you think of this idea? I forgot who tweeted it, but I saw someone say on Twitter this past weekend they need a World Seniors, like retired NHL players during like this time
No,
of year getting together,
terrible
and
idea,
old
Johnny.
timers best on best. I think that'd be
Terrible
fun.
idea. Terrible
I'd watch
idea.
it. I'd tune in.
Terrible idea.
You wouldn't watch Messier and Gretzky go at it right now?
These guys are old, man. You don't want these guys to get hurt. I mean, it's a terrible idea. You've had better.
Maybe they'll play pickleball or
Johnny,
something.
don't ruin the show here. End it. Stop. Just stop.
All right. Well, a great and fun first episode. We want to thank Frank Seravalli for hopping on once again. We'll be coming at you live every Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. Eastern time on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. I'm Jonny Lazarus. That's Colby Cohen. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic